Alright, somebody reset the clock. We almost went 6 months, but it's that time again. I finally stopped being a nerd and now I got my nose out of the books and a Bioshock related video for you. Today we're gonna go over the Bioshock movie that never was. Or at least, the scraps of it still floating around online that prove that it was existing and going to be made at one point in time. I'll say right out of the gate that this video was particularly frustrating to make because so much of this links back to like dead links and sites that got rebranded and lost a lot of their old articles. Heck, there were even a bunch of LA Times articles that were online only that I could no longer find because, I don't know, people weren't paying attention to things when they were rebranding. And that's a shame. But we do have enough information here to piece together what happened with the Bioshock movie, especially based on a few recent findings from the last few years that answered a lot of questions as to what happened with this movie. I think a bit of historical context would help here. Bioshock came out in late 2007 to massive critical acclaim. And in addition to its critical acclaim among the sphere of gaming, Bioshock came out at a very good time socially because people were starting to come around to the idea that things like video games and comic books were stuff that everyone could like. For instance, there was gonna be an Iron Man movie next year. Who would have thought that was gonna happen? You could now go to Hot Topic and buy something other than an MCR t-shirt or crazy pants. And also, everyone had consoles and cool TVs to play their video games on because our parents took out those option arm loans. Surely that won't come back to haunt us in the near future. And then, about 6 months after Bioshock's amazing release and 2 months after that Iron Man movie turned out to be a smash hit, Universal announced that they were going to have a geek culture related movie too. They were gonna make Bioshock the movie. With the announcement of the Bioshock movie came the announcement that Gore Verkbinski of Pirates of the Caribbean was going to be directing, and that John Logan, who wrote Gladiator among a bunch of other things, was going to be the writer for this movie. On top of it all, it was going to have an enormous budget, bigger than Iron Man's budget. It was gonna be huge. This announcement wasn't particularly out of the ordinary either for the time. On top of the Bioshock movie, there was also talks about having a Halo movie and a Warcraft movie. They were looking to make anything from nerd culture into a movie at the time because it was an exciting new market to explore. And on top of that, people were doubling down on the comic book movies too. There was gonna be a Hulk movie, a Thor movie, maybe even a Captain America movie. It was a crazy time to be alive. It seemed like everything was being set into motion to make a high-quality, entertaining Bioshock movie. Things were starting to get into pre-production, a script was being written by somebody who had some very good chops when it comes to script writing, a strong director was at the helm, and everything seemed great. However, as some of you might remember, something pretty nasty happened towards the end of 2008. Remember those option arm loans I mentioned? Yeah, those were a bad idea because those were also tied to the insurance industry, which was tied to literally everything else in the market, and massive crash. This spelled disaster for anything that wasn't a core moneymaker for anyone ever, as projects all over the place got slashed, including at Universal. Thanks to all this financial turmoil, the year 2009 became an emotional roller coaster for the production of the Bioshock movie, and if it was going to happen at all at this point. In early 2009, Universal announced that they were putting Bioshock the movie in a holding pattern and were currently exploring their options to shoot the movies overseas in order to receive tax credits. Something that would end up being not particularly attractive because most of the Bioshock movie was going to be shot on green screen. A couple months later, in early May of 2009, Prison Break actor Wentworth Miller sent out a tweet saying that he was involved in the production of the Bioshock movie. This created a flurry of headlines and speculation about what Wentworth Miller was going to be doing in the movie, and everyone initially speculated he was going to be Jack, but on a personal note, I would have rather seen Wentworth Miller play Fontaine with Dominic Purcell jumping in to play Fontaine's right-hand man from the Bioshock book. To be fair though, the Bioshock book hadn't been published yet, so nobody quite knew about this. However, while the film had scored an actor, it lost a director. In June of 2009, in an interview, Gore Verkbinski stated that because of the option to film overseas to receive a tax credit, that would be far too prohibitive to his very active schedule as he was working on the animated movie Rango at the time, and he just wouldn't be able to direct the movie if it went overseas. He would stay on, however, as a producer because his production house was making the movie, however, he would not direct. In Verkbinski's place, Juan Carlos Fresnadillo was brought on, who you might remember from directing 28 Weeks Later. Not days, 28 weeks. After just under 2 years of nothing being quite confirmed, Gore Verbinski eventually came out and said the movie was indefinitely on hold because, well, no studio was willing to give a hard R that much money no matter where they shot it. Gore Verbinski was very adamant about Bioshock the movie staying a hard R, as there was a lot of body horror stuff he wanted to explore, among with just the general idea of, if you've played Bioshock, you know the first 15 minutes of that game are pretty much rated R material. In November of 2011, Ken Levine himself eventually chimed in to the website that is now GameIndustry.biz, saying, "For us and for Take-Two, it really has to be something that will A, give the fans something they want, and B, for those who don't know Bioshock, really introduce them to something that is consistent with the game and is going to be a good representation of the game." Based on this quote, it seems particularly evident that no one was really willing to compromise if a studio felt squeamish. Another nail in the coffin for the Bioshock movie. A few months later, in early 2012, it was announced that Juan Carlos Fresnadillo had decided to leave the production, leaving the Bioshock movie with no solid director. It seemed that the Bioshock movie was all but cancelled in name. The first 2 Bioshock games were well behind us, and Bioshock Infinite was imminently on the horizon, and it was evident that Bioshock Infinite didn't really take place in Rapture, so that's not going to have much of a tie to anything. We eventually did get a bit of closure though, when Ken Levine spoke at BAFTA in early 2013. It wasn't even something he was planning to address, and it was even over time, but during Ken Levine's BAFTA talk, one person from the Q&A asked him about the Bioshock movie, and he told everyone that it all boiled down to how Universal wanted to give them $80 million despite the budget asking for $200 million, and since Ken Levine was given the right by 2K to kill the project at any time, he's like, okay, go pound sand. And that was it. You know, you could say at this point that the Bioshock movie didn't die, that it was murdered. Well, I'm here to tell you that at this channel, we're better than that. And also, because this wasn't the end. Over the course of the next year after these statements were made and Bioshock Infinite came out, not only were all the storyboards leaked, but also the concept art was released, and it lent more credence to the idea that this movie was weeks away from shooting before it got canned. An additional layer of intrigue was added when someone noticed that Sony Pictures had just registered website domain names that were related to a Bioshock movie. While there was no official confirmation at the time that Sony had agreed to make the Bioshock movie, this was a very telling move, as sometimes in order to get something going you need to make sure you have the website ready, and some credence was led to this theory. As some of you might remember, in the year 2015, Sony Pictures released a very controversial movie called The Interview. And subsequently, be it by North Korean government actors or a very disgruntled Sony employee, there was a massive leak from the Sony Pictures company structure. All their emails got out, and someone sifted through those emails and found that there were internal memos going around about the possibility of making a Bioshock movie in 2015. According to these emails, it said that Ryan Gosling was interested in the picture, and while they hadn't quite acquired the rights to the Bioshock franchise, they were, and I quote, closing up the deal. So you're thinking to yourself, well then, why don't we have the Bioshock movie by now? Well, let's get a bit more into the subsequent history of Sony Pictures. As some of you noticed, Sony Pictures released some serious box office bombs, and it became very evident that there was a lot of mismanagement going on at the company. And unfortunately, Sony Pictures was not in a place to be doing fringe movies like this. It's now late 2018 as I record and write this, and unfortunately there's still no sign of anything, so it's likely that whatever deals were needed to acquire the Bioshock license fell through or lost interest. Another bit of ember on this dying fire is that in 2017, Gore Verkbinski did a Reddit AMA where of course he was immediately asked about the Bioshock movie and what happened to it. Verbinski did repeat a lot of the things that Ken Levine said in his 2013 BAFTA talk. However, he did cite that with the success of 2016's Deadpool being a hard R that made a ton of money, he thinks now there's a good chance of the Bioshock movie being a viable movie to be made. Unfortunately though, again, it does not seem that Sony's in the mood right now, but would rather try and be Marvel's proxy. Another thing we have to consider on whether or not Sony's going to make this Bioshock movie is that they initially considered it to be a tentpole style movie, meaning that the movie was going to come out surrounded by other events taking place in the franchise. Something that would be getting a lot of attention drawn to it. If we look at the other video game based movies that have came out in the last couple years, such as Assassin's Creed or the Tomb Raider that didn't have Angelina Jolie in it, both of them came out around the time that a major installment in their franchise was coming out, and they had a lot of stuff to tentpole around. Bioshock, however, has not seen a major installment in its franchise for nearly 6 years now, so that's gonna be a big roadblock in making this movie. Now, despite 2K's assurances that another Bioshock game is going to come out eventually, again, the things I've said in my previous video still ring true, that it's been long enough to where if they had anything about a Bioshock game in the works, we would have at least seen something by now. Especially in today's cultures of teasers, announcements for announcements, and leaks all over the place. And this all brings us to today, where the movie was gonna happen, but then it was canceled, but then it was maybe gonna happen again. But now, after a few comments, we are otherwise radio silence on if this movie is ever going to exist. Apparently, John Logan's script was completed and it's still out there, and no one has ever said anything less than that that script was amazing. And God, I would like to hold that script in my hands if it's out there. However, I'm really not into the idea of like breaking into Universal's vault. That's a little far for me. Nobody in particular seems to be in a hurry to make this movie. Universal's kind of on its back foot after their whole DC cinematic universe fell apart and a few other blunders. Sony Pictures seems to be in no particular rush to try and wrangle the rights to Bioshock away from Universal. And most of all, Ken Levine has pretty much moved on from the Bioshock name. He's doing whatever he's doing at Ghost Story Games, working with those narrative building blocks, which, while I'm very interested to see, I'm still a little disappointed that that does not bode well for whatever happens next with Bioshock, which currently seems to be 2K occasionally releasing a news article saying, "We're working on another game for it, we swear." And there's still a ton of questions about this movie that just won't be answered, or the people that can answer these questions haven't been asked these questions yet. So instead of the usual YouTube callouts, I'm going to ask for a few things. If you are John Logan or Gore Verkbinski, please slide into my DMs. If you are Wentworth Miller and you would like to talk about your role in the Bioshock movie when it was new and fresh, please slide into my DMs. If you or anyone who ever may have worked on the pre-production of this Bioshock movie, please talk to me. If you are, or you happen to know the people who are part of a much larger channel with much more resources and influence that might be able to help me research deeper into what happened to this Bioshock movie, please slide into my DMs. If you are Ken Levine, who I understand would have a reason not to want to talk to me, please, I am open to talk about what happened in this movie. This is something that has been eating me for a while because I was so excited for this movie as a kid, but then eventually after the market crash and more turmoil in the movie producing world, it just sort of became the movie equivalent of vaporware. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this video, whatever it might be to you. I don't know what to call it aside from maybe a rather depressing historical review. It's my hope that one day I'm going to be able to make a follow-up to this video that hopefully in some sort of heaven best possible timeline starts with me running around holding a script saying, I've got it, I finally got it. But in the meantime, sign-offs are stupid and I don't really know how to do them. What have you done? Saucy boy. Why were you in Daddy's undershirt drawer? Would you like a freedom? Please don't scratch me. Do you want to be a shirt? Are you just looking for new? Oh, you never want the pets. You only want the pets when you want to jump up on me while I'm sitting at my desk so you can shed all over me. Is that your game? You want to shed on my shirts before I even wear them? Is this it? Is this your new endgame? How about pets? You jump into my undershirts and you won't even accept my scritches. Well, it could be worse. You could have jumped in the filing cabinet or something. You have to get out now. You have to get out now. You have to get out now.
It's fine, he can stay. For now.
They're my shirts, honey.
They're gonna be okay, he's not gonna pee on them.
Well, he is. You do not instill confidence. Come on. You know, oh, I know what we can do. Oh, I've got your tummy. Jesus. Mister, no rough. No rough play. I know that was bad. I started it, but no rough play. Go scream at the bathroom door like you usually do. Ah, crap. I lost my spot.